Dr. Brian Klaas is an associate professor in global politics at University College London, an affiliate researcher at the University of Oxford, and a contributing writer for The Atlantic. He is also the author of 5 books, including Fluke, Chance, Chaos, and Why. Everything We Do Matters, 2024, and Corruptible, Who Gets Power and How It Changes Us, 2021. Klaas writes the popular The Garden of Forking Paths Substack and created the award-winning Power Corrupts podcast, which has been downloaded roughly 3 million times.
Western modernity has an obsession with what I call the delusion of individualism. And it is comforting to a lot of people to think that they're in control of their own lives, so that they are the ones who are driving change, and that it's not really up to other people, that your life unfolds the way you want it to. Or if you're a politician, that you can control the way the economy is going to work out or the way the election is going to turn out. Now, the problem with this, of course, is that there's a lot of different ways about thinking of the world, and one of them is Eastern philosophy, which thinks a lot more about the intersections between people and the relational idea of how we're all connected. Now, I think this is scientific fact. I think we are all connected, and we pretend otherwise. And there's a story that's sort of a strange story that I saw in the press while I was researching Fluke about a person who went swimming off the coast of Greece, a man named Ivan. And Ivan goes out into the sea, and he's not the best swimmer, and a riptide basically sucks him out into the ocean. Now, his friends are pretty upset about this because he disappears from sight and they can't find him. And there's about 24 hours where Ivan is missing at sea. And we all know how these stories turn out when someone is missing at sea for 24 hours. Except for in this story, right as Ivan is about to slip beneath the waves and drown, he spots a soccer ball bobbing on the surface of the ocean. Now, that's already extraordinary enough. You have this moment where he just is saved by this passing soccer ball that's floating, and he clings to it and is eventually rescued. But the more extraordinary part of the story is that when this news made the Greek television reports, there was a woman who was watching the news, and I sort of imagined her dropping her cup of coffee or whatever as they see the soccer ball on the screen, because she recognized the ball. And she knew that her children had been playing with that exact same ball and had accidentally kicked it off a cliff 80 miles away from where Ivan eventually intersected with the trajectory of that ball bobbing on the sea 10 days later. And the point is that, the kids would look at this and they would think, oh no, we kicked the ball off the cliff, let's buy another ball. They would have no idea. But it turned out that that kick is what saved the life of another person who was about to drown. Now, when you think that way, it's extremely obvious that there's an interconnection between those lives. The problem is that there's not some magic that Ivan had. It's that everybody is actually unfolding in this way where we're constantly being affected by the actions of people we will never see and never meet. And the extremely obvious way that we can understand this as well is the pandemic from the coronavirus outbreak in 2020, where you have a single person get infected with a virus in Wuhan, China, and the lives of 8 billion people change for many, many years. And the trajectories of our lives are irrevocably changed. All of us are different because of this pandemic. And it's from one virus infecting one person, potentially thousands of miles away from where you live, and everything in the world became different. So this is the nature of reality. And I think it's something that's a coping mechanism effectively for us to just ignore the science, ignore the physics, and imagine that we are in charge. And this is where that saying that I come back to throughout Fluke arises, which is we control nothing, but we influence everything. And for Ivan and the soccer ball, the influence that he experienced was from a couple of kids he will never have met who saved his life.
In this presentation, we will begin to see that we do not control our will or power to choose. Instead, there are thousands, perhaps countless, of behavioural influences, bias and heuristics, shaping every act of will, choice, or decision we make. Most of them operate beneath conscious awareness. They silently guide attention, define what feels true, and even determine what options we believe are available. Imagine your mind as a rider sitting on top of an elephant walking down a path. The rider represents your conscious self, the part of you that thinks you're in control. But here's the truth. The rider isn't really steering. The elephant is. and the elephant represents your emotions, your deepest motivations, and your unconscious biases. We feel like we're making rational, conscious decisions, but most of the time, our emotional and unconscious mind is guiding the way. The rider can suggest, but the elephant decides where to go. The holy instant is the moment you remember who you truly are, beyond the layers of identity, history, and sense of self. It is the instant when perception gives way to knowing and the illusion of separation dissolves. It's easy to talk about the holy instant, but for many sincere and good-hearted people, it can feel just out of reach. They long for it, pray for it, even try to will it into being. They desire the experience of awakening, of remembering their true self, and yet nothing seems to happen. Then these people are told that the reason for this is subtle but profound. The holy instant cannot be forced by effort, demand, or control. The very act of trying to make it happen keeps the mind centered in the brain's network. Furthermore, they are told that it's the difference between willpower and surrender. Willpower strains toward a goal. Surrender relaxes into awareness. Again, it's easy to talk about it in this way. But for many sincere and good-hearted people, it remains just out of reach. In Chapter 4 of A Course in Miracles, you can find a statement regarding the enactment of separation from oneness. Human living has indeed been needlessly wasted in repetition compulsion. This reenacts the separation, the loss of power, the foolish journey of the ego in its attempt at reparation, and finally, the crucifixion of the body, or death. Repetition compulsions can be endless unless they are given up by an act of will, or more properly as active creation. In Chapter 18, it speaks of a little willingness. The holy instant is the result of your determination to remember your authentic self. You prepare for it only to the extent of recognizing that you want it above all else. In Chapter 31, it reads, "Choose once again. Temptation would persuade you are a body, born in what must die, unable to escape its frailty, and bound by what it orders you to feel. It sets the limits on what you can do. How do you choose again? You always choose between your weakness and the strength of your authentic self. And what you choose is what you think is real." In this presentation, we will explore what an act of will truly means and what it points to in our lived experience. You will begin to see that we do not control our will or power to choose. Instead, we can call on determination, a natural inner force already within us. When we release the illusion of control, we create space for determination to guide us. This shift marks the beginning of remembering our authentic self. Consciousness is not a passive reflection of reality, but a rich, predictive, and deeply embodied process that continuously constructs both the world and the self. Experiences of volition are indispensable to our survival. They are self-fulfilling perceptual inferences that bring about voluntary actions. Without them, we could not navigate complex environments or learn from previous voluntary actions to improve future outcomes. There are three defining features of volitional experiences: the feeling that I am doing what I want to do, the sense that I could have done otherwise. Voluntary actions seem to come from within rather than be imposed externally. A system has degrees of freedom to the extent that it can respond in multiple ways to a state of affairs. Voluntary behaviour depends on the competence to control these degrees of freedom in alignment with beliefs, values, goals, and the demands of the environment and body. This competence is implemented by a network of processes distributed over many brain regions. These interwoven processes play out in a continual loop spanning the brain, body, and environment, with no beginning and no end, producing flexible, goal-oriented behaviour. This network funnels a vast array of potential causes into a single flow of voluntary actions, and at times inhibitions. It is the perception of this network that underpins subjective experiences of volition. The Libet experiment shows that brain activity leading to an action begins before we become consciously aware of our intention to act. In other words, the brain initiates decisions prior to our conscious awareness of choosing. This suggests that our sense of free will, the belief that we consciously generate decisions, may be an illusion, and that unconscious processes and determinism may be guiding our actions long before we realize it.
In the early 80s, Benjamin Libet designed an elegant experiment to help us understand the mechanism of decision-making in the brain. This is the Libet experiment. All I have to do is watch the spinning dot and click a button whenever I feel like it, then report to the scientist at what time I felt the urge to click. Meanwhile, my brain activity is being monitored. Most of us would assume that our choices register as an increase in brain activity and result in us clicking the button. But what's actually observed is a build-up of brain activity, called the readiness potential, a full second earlier than the conscious urge to click. This has been replicated hundreds of times.
What are the implications of this kind of experiment?
So the folk definition of free will is that your mind controls your body, meaning that your mind is free to decide what to do and send the command to your body. But when you consider the Libet experiment, it means that conscious intentions, instead of being the cause of motor preparation, is the consequence of an antecedent brain activity. So it challenges this dualistic view of mind-body causation.
And so in my group, we've gone back and redone all the Libet experiments very carefully, and we find that you get a readiness potential even in the absence of a motor act, like doing this versus that, if a person expects something to happen. So my own guess is that the readiness potential is tied up with expectation or anticipation that something is about to happen.
Perhaps. So, in fact, at the moment, it's very difficult to know the exact way of, how it works exactly.
The experiment is over. My mind is no longer the controller. Rather, it's firmly seated in my conscious brain, guiding and responding to whispers from my subconscious.
John Dylan Haynes's research builds on Libet's findings, showing that decisions are formed unconsciously seconds before we become aware of them. In his studies, brain scanning technology could predict a person's choice before the person consciously knew what they were going to choose. This suggests that what we experience as choice is often the brain revealing a decision that has already been made beneath conscious awareness.
But probably we can say that a lot of our decisions, even not all our decisions, are the result of a prior brain activity. And as an example, there is an elegant study by the team of John Dylan Haynes who showed that by using neuroimaging measurements with MRI scanner, you can actually predict what will be the decision of participants before they are actually conscious of having taken that decision.
This begs the question, how can we have free will if our unconscious brain is making decisions before we do?
When we put these findings together, a deeper truth emerges. What we call choice may not arise from the conscious mind at all. Instead, consciousness witnesses decisions unfolding from deeper layers of mind and being. Rather than a threat to our freedom, this understanding opens a doorway. It invites us to stop clinging to the illusion of control and instead recognize a more natural power within us. When we surrender the belief that we consciously manufacture every decision, we become receptive to a deeper intelligence, a quiet, steady determination that arises from our authentic self and gently leads us toward truth, alignment, and freedom. What is the aspect of being you that you cling to most tightly? For many, it's the feeling of being in control of your actions, of being the author of your thoughts. This compelling notion of free will is complex but central. Dr. Beranard Kastrup is a Dutch philosopher, computer scientist, and leading voice in the field of metaphysical idealism. The view that consciousness, not matter, is the primary reality. He holds dual PhDs in philosophy and computer engineering, has worked in advanced research institutions including CERN, and currently serves as Executive Director of the Essentia Foundation. Through his work, he argues persuasively that the universe is fundamentally mental, and that what we call the self is a local expression of a deeper, unified consciousness.
There is no distinction between free will and determinism. We think there is because of our conceptual confusion. At the level of what truly exists, there is no such distinction. What nature decides to do is both what it desperately wants to do and what it must do. What nature does is a result of what nature is. Nature wills what it wills because it is what it is. And it can't will otherwise without being something that it is not. Yeah. But of course, it is what it is, so it wills what it does. There is no external environment beyond nature to impose choices on nature. What nature chooses to do comes out of itself. Therefore, it comes out of its being. It's a result of what it is. So nature wills what it must will given what it is. But it does make choices. It couldn't make different choices because it isn't different. Nature is what it is and not something else. It does make choices, but its choices are a direct consequence of what it is. Yeah. So from that perspective, what nature wills is what it must. And what nature must is exactly what it wills. So there is no distinction at the level of nature between free will and determinism. And that's why we can both say, you have free will, because you're a part of nature, and nature has free will. But why does nature have free will? Because it's the same as determinism, and determinism is true. So by the same token, you could also say, everything is deterministic. Why? Because free will is true, but free will is the same thing as determinism. So everything is deterministic. That was the point that I was trying to get across. Of course, we all make choices. We are parts of nature. We make choices every day, thousands of choices every day, starting from whether you touch the ground with your left or your right foot the moment you step out of bed. The idea of determinism does not deny the obvious empirical fact that we are always making choices. What it denies is the abstraction that we call the could have been. I could have chosen differently. Then I would say you could only have chosen differently if you were different. But you were what you were. Yeah. Nature was what it was. So the could have been is an abstraction, and I think it's a fantasy.
And it helps me in a sense that the opposite of determinism is randomness, right? And as you put in your essay, that is not what we mean when we say our free will. You not say it's random. No, you mean it is determined, but it's not determined by. It's determined by what you prefer to be determined by, right? That's what you like to think. I want it to be determined about my wish to sit down here with Bernardo made me sit here down with Bernardo. But then again, it is determined, right? It's not random. So that's also where you run into philosophical problems. So I think analytically your point is very clear. I think just psychologically, we left the conversation saying that, I think we quoted Fred Matzer, and I got a question also. I mean, can you choose to disallow being played by the universe? That's sort of what rang with me.
A lot of people are not allowing themselves to be played by the universe. That, too, is a direct result of what the universe is, because those people are part of the universe. So the universe sometimes disallows itself to be played by itself. That's part of the natural unfolding of what is, what exists. It is such that this contradiction can emerge. Nature is sometimes self-contradictory. This is empirically obvious, right? And not only from a mathematical perspective, from those theorems of the 1930s, but empirically obvious as well. So the point is not that you don't choose. We all choose all the time. The point is there is no could have been. The could have been is a human fantasy. Again, the point is that everything is ultimately determined, because the people who are very much into free will, they would also reject the notion that one's choices are random, the throw of dice. There is no meaning in that. If your choices are random, what meaning is in there? So people who are after free will because they associate with meaning, they themselves will immediately acknowledge that what they mean by it is not randomness. Therefore, every choice is determined. The thing is, the human intuition in this regard says the following: my choices are free if they are determined by me and not by nature at large. What people who are into free will, what they mean by a free choice is that the choice they make, let's say my free will choice is a choice I make, so it is determined, but it's determined by me. It's determined by that which I identify with. I don't identify with my brain activity. I have never seen it. I identify with my conscious inner life. I identify with my preferences, my tastes, my goals, things that I experience from within. So if my choices are determined by my preferences, my tastes, my goals, then they are free will choices. Now, there are two arguments why even this doesn't hold water. One is, there is no you separate from nature. A you separate from nature or a me separate from nature is merely nominal. It's an artifact of language. It follows the structure of language, but the structure of reality is not the structure of language. Language is defined for convenience, for communication, and not to capture and reflect the ontological structure of nature. That's not what language is about. So there is no you separate from nature. There is no me separate from nature. So there is no choice I make that is determined exclusively by the linguistic me, because the me is just molecules in the ocean of nature. It's determined by nature. Another answer is, even if your choices are free in the sense of being always determined by your will, by your preferences, by your plans, who determines your will, your preferences, and your plans? Is it you? Of course not. If you could choose what you want, you would be the happiest person in the world. Whatever your circumstances, you would simply choose to want precisely the circumstances you happen to have. We don't determine those. So our will is literally not free in the sense that we can't just change our wills. We fall in love for who we fall in love. We don't choose who we fall in love with. Otherwise, we would all fall in love with the person who is available. That's not how reality works. We don't choose our tastes. We don't choose our preferences. We don't choose even what we want to do in our lives. These things are chosen by nature.
Yeah, and I think
so what is this business of free will? What do people mean?
Beranard Kastrup's insight makes this even clearer. Although we experience ourselves as making decisions, these decisions are not authored by the personal I we believe ourselves to be. Instead, they arise from what we are in truth. What you decide to do is both what you want to do above all else and what you must do. Eckhart Tolle is a German-born spiritual teacher and self-help author. His books include The Power of Now, A Guide to Spiritual Enlightenment and a New Earth, Awakening to Your Life's Purpose.
Surprised there's nothing on Google about Eckhart and free will, but maybe I haven't said anything about it. So here we go. As you know, it's an eternal, ancient philosophical question, and there's never been a definitive answer that everybody would agree with in that sense. So is there free will? You mentioned everybody's doing their best because nobody can act beyond their level of consciousness, etc., for example. Okay, let's start from on one level, and then we go on to the next level. On the level of egoic unconsciousness, where you are a conditioned entity, your mental, emotional makeup is totally conditioned by the past, and you are completely identified with the conditioning of your mind, and in that state, that spiritually speaking is the unconscious state, it is obvious that in that state there is no freedom at all, because you are forced to act out the unconscious conditioning of your mind with which you are completely identified. So I think most people would probably agree, if you understand that on that level there is no possibility of freedom. Your actions are determined by your conditioned mind. You are forced to act as you do because there is no choice, because choice would imply some awareness. So on that level, there's certainly no freedom. Then awareness comes in. The human being begins to awaken. Then it appears, I'm not saying it is the case, it appears that then the freedom begins to be a possibility, because you can choose to step out of the conditioning of your mind. You can recognize a conditioned thought, and you're no longer compelled to act it out because there is an awareness there. You can choose a certain course of action, not from the conditioning of your mind, but from the presence. So you can act, and you have much more freedom that before you could not have. Freedom comes with awareness. So it's then relative to the unconscious state, there is now freedom to act. But if you look more deeply, even there on that level, you are connected with the totality of consciousness. You're only an expression of the totality of consciousness. You are not really a separate entity. You are as who said it? You are, was it Alan Watts who said you in the same way that the wave is something that the ocean is doing, you are something that the whole universe is doing in the same way. So the wave is something the ocean is doing, you are something that the universe is doing. So although it appears from a certain relative to the previous state of unconscious, there is freedom, and relative to that there is freedom. But then if you look more deeply into that, you realize that even there, one cannot say that you are choosing this. You are an expression of consciousness, And consciousness, one could say, is choosing, and you think you're doing it. Sometimes people ask me, can you choose to be present? From one perspective, you can choose to be present. From another perspective, one could say that presence chooses you. It chooses to become present through you. Depends how you look at it. So in ultimate terms, or in relative terms, there is freedom relative to the unconscious state when you become more conscious. But even there, it's only relative to the unconscious state. Even there is not absolute freedom, because you do not exist as an independent entity. You are part of the web of interconnectedness that is the whole universe. So in that sense, there is no freedom of choice of the individual, because ultimately there is no individual.
Eckhart points out that the unconscious, ego-identified person lives from conditioned patterns of thought and emotion. In this state, there is no freedom. Behavior arises from past conditioning, and actions feel inevitable because they are. With awakening and genuine self-awareness, it may seem at first as if freedom appears, as though I now have the ability to choose. But this too is a transitional perception. What actually unfolds is that you begin to recognize that you are not the personal ego at all, but an expression of consciousness itself. Action flows from a universal web of consciousness, not from a separate individual self. Alex J. O'Connor, also known as Cosmic Skeptic, is an English public speaker, writer, and social media personality. He is best known for his videos on philosophy on YouTube, most notably on the subjects ethics, religion, and atheism.
I don't believe in free will, although, as I keep saying to people as of late, I'm agnostic about most things, not because I don't have a view. Like, I'm pretty convinced that free will doesn't make sense as a concept, but just because I think it's so easy to be catastrophically wrong in so many ways that I'm just constantly aware that, like, this I could have missed something crucial at the basis of this thought, right? Free will, at least the kind of free will that I'm talking about, is like agency of your actions, your ability to control what you do. If you rewound the clock, you could have done something else. You could have worn a different shirt today. You could have not come to this talk, something like that. I don't think that exists. That conversation is tied up intimately with the question of determinism. Is everything preordained? But that's not the same question, I think. Like, there could be a universe that is not predetermined, and yet you don't have control over your actions. You know, like a tree does not have control over the way in which it sways. But even in a non-deterministic universe, it wouldn't have control. The interesting question is, like, to what extent are we the authors of our own actions? And for me, there are lots of ways of looking at this, but a good philosophical entry point to this is to consider the behaviors that you do, any kind of action that you ever perform. You either do it because you want to or because you're forced to. Those are the only two options. Anytime you do anything at all, consciously at least. You do it because you want to or because you're forced to. Now, if you come to this talk, it's because you wanted to come to the talk or because you were forced to by some person or something. Now, you might say, okay, well, I didn't really want to come to this talk, but, you know, I thought that, like, it might be good for this reason or that reason, but I didn't really want to. You know, I went to the gym earlier, but I didn't really want to go to the gym. Okay, but we've got to be comprehensive in our analysis here. You didn't want to go to the gym, but you did want to be healthy. You wanted to stay at home and be lazy, but you also wanted to be healthy. Which of those things did you want more? Well, for a fact, we know that what you wanted more was to go to the gym, because that's what you ended up doing. And had the desires been stronger in the other direction, you would have done the other thing. So when you've got a choice in front of you and you're trying to figure out which one you want more, you don't so much decide which one you want more, as you just find out. I mean, like, presumably most of you right now would prefer, if I gave you the option between having a strawberry milkshake and slapping your mother in the face, you would prefer to have a strawberry milkshake. And crudely speaking, I would ask you to try to want the other one. Try to make the other one more desirable. Not the same thing as choosing to do it. Choose to make it more desirable. You can't just do that. You can't control your desires in that way. It's like, okay, well, I could force myself to go and think about my mother in the worst possible terms and like try to compel myself to, and yeah, you could sort of control your wants that way. But you'd have to want to do that in order to do that. And you wouldn't be able to control how much you wanted to do that. In other words, you just push the problem back. So I think you only ever do anything because you want to or because you're forced to. There's a balance of essentially desires. Conscious action it presupposes that there is a way you want the world to be that it is currently not. That's why we act. You know, I pick up a glass of water and drink it because I'm thirsty and I would prefer not to be thirsty. Preference governs actions. But also I'm talking right now, so I don't want to pick up the water. Which of those desires is stronger? My desire to keep talking or the desire to drink the water? Well, you already know the answer to that question without having to scan my brain because it's my behaviors. I don't get to choose that. That's completely outside of my control. As Schopenhauer famously put it, as one of our speakers quoted in the debate last night, you can do whatever you will, but you can't will what you will. And that's the crucial thing. So, is the universe determined or not? I don't know. But that to me is completely irrelevant to the question of whether you have control over your actions. Of course, if the universe is not determined, a lot of people think that's because there's some kind of randomness in physics. Either everything is following a set path from the Big Bang, or maybe at the quantum level, there's some kind of randomness going on. I always like to remind people that randomness is by definition something that you are also not in control of. If something is determined, it means that you can't help but do it. If something is random, which is to say indeterminate, that's the definition of not being in control. So either way, you're not in control of your actions because you're not in control of your wants. But as I say, I think that's a robust philosophical case.
Free will is usually understood as the ability to consciously control our actions. In a universe governed by cause and effect, every action arises from prior conditions, meaning you are not the conscious source of your behavior. Likewise, in a universe ruled by randomness, you still wouldn't be in control, because random events are not you making choices either. Our actions appear to come from our preferences, desires, and motivations, from what we want most in any given moment. But here is the key insight. We do not choose what we want. We don't select our desires, impulses, tendencies, or motivations. They arise on their own. As philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer put it, man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. Dr. Robert Sapolsky is the John A. and Cynthia Fry Gunn Professor at Stanford University and is a professor of biology, neurology, and neurosurgery. He shares his insight that free will is a deception and determinism is true.
Along the lines of choice, I'd like to shift gears slightly and talk about free will, about our ability to make choices at all.
Well, my personal way out and left field inflammatory stance is I don't think we have a shred of free will. Despite, 95% of philosophers, and I think probably the majority of neuroscientists saying that we have free will in at least some circumstances, I don't think there's any at all. And the reason for this is you do something, you behave, you make a choice, whatever. And to understand why you did that, where did that intention come from? Part of it was due to the sensory environment you were in the previous minute. Some of it is from the hormone levels in your bloodstream that morning. Some of it is from whether you had a wonderful or stressful last 3 months and what sort of neuroplasticity happened. Part of it is what hormone levels you were exposed to as a fetus. Part of it is what culture your ancestors came up with and thus how you were parented when you were a kid. All of those are in there, and you can't understand where behavior is coming from without incorporating all of those. And at that point, not only are there all of these relevant factors, but they're ultimately all one factor. If you're talking about what evolution has to do with your behavior, by definition, you're also talking about genetics. If you're talking about what your genes have to do with behavior, by definition, you're talking about how your brain was constructed or what proteins are coded for. If you're talking about your mood disorder now, you're talking about the sense of efficacy you were getting as a 5-year-old. They're all intertwined. And when you look at all those influences, basically, like, the challenge is, show me a neuron that just caused that behavior, or show me a network of neurons that just caused that behavior, and show me that nothing about what they just did was influenced by anything from the sensory environment 1 second ago to the evolution of your species. And there's no space in there to fit in a free will concept that winds up being, in your brain, but not of your brain. There's simply no wiggle room for it.
Libertarian free will. The belief that our thoughts and some human actions are entirely freely chosen. Hard determinism. The belief that all events are caused by past events such that nothing other than what does occur could occur. Many people watching this presentation probably think that they believe in both free will and determinism.
Believe in both things, that many of your actions are free and that the world is governed by cause and effect. But it turns out you can't rationally hold both views, because traditionally libertarians have defined free actions according to what's known as the principle of alternate possibilities. That might sound like a plot device for a sci-fi show, but this principle says that an action is free only if the agent, that is the person doing the thing, could have done otherwise. So truly free actions require options. Determinism, by contrast, doesn't allow options. It holds that every event is caused by a previous event, which means that an agent can never have done anything other than what they did, and therefore they are never free. But let's look at these two options more closely, and also let's look at my breakfast. Libertarianism says that my decision to eat oatmeal this morning wasn't necessarily caused by anything that happened before it. Instead, it could have been the result of non-physical events, specifically my own thought that originated right at that point. I ate oatmeal because I decided to eat oatmeal. End of story. But libertarianism runs counter to what we know about the workings of the physical world, with one thing causing another. So libertarians need a way to account for their view. One way they do that is by making a distinction between what's known as event causation and agent causation. Event causation means that no physical event can occur without having been caused by a previous physical event. So many libertarians concede that the physical world itself is deterministic, like a baseball is flying through the air because someone hit that ball with a bat. But many libertarians also argue that there's such a thing as agent causation, which says that an agent, a being propelled by a mind, can start a whole chain of causality that wasn't caused by anything else. So the person who hit the ball most likely did so because they just decided to do it. By this logic, agents have the ability to affect the causal chain of the universe. They can make stuff happen on their own. But many philosophers find this idea untenable. Where would these free decisions, the ones that launch entirely new causal chains, come from, they ask? Are they simply random? What would compel an agent to make one decision and not another? And if you can answer those questions, if you can explain what would cause an agent to act, then, well, you've just reinforced the position that actions are caused rather than free. The fact is, it's pretty difficult to find arguments that support libertarian free will. The best argument in favor of it seems to be that it just feels an awful lot like we're free. And libertarians argue that we shouldn't discount the legitimacy of our own personal subjective experiences. So if we feel so free, we should seriously consider the possibility that we are. That point has a certain intuitive appeal, but if you can't come up with an argument to defend your feeling, then good philosophical reasoning recommends that you reject it, or at least withhold judgment until you can get some evidence together. So now let's see if the hard determinists can do any better. 18th century French philosopher Baron d'Holbach said that none of our actions are actually free. D'Holbach believed that everything that's happening right now is the result of an unbroken chain of events. Everything, he said, is the inevitable result of what came before, including everything that we do. Our actions are caused in the same way that, say, home runs are caused by bats hitting balls, or tornadoes are caused by warm air systems hitting cool air systems in the right conditions. This means that humans and our actions are just part of the physical world, bound by its physical laws. This belief is often explained through a view known as reductionism. Reductionism is the view that all parts of the world and of our own own experience can be traced back or reduced down to one singular thing. So, for example, you see your mind as being capable of making free decisions. You think that what goes on in your head when you make a choice is not at all like bats and balls. But, well, mental states are brain states, or at least they're directly tied to your brain, and brain states are biological. And biological states are physical states. And the physical world, as we already said, is deterministic. There's just no room for free will in this picture. We think we're free, but we're not. And really, as scientific thinkers, why would we assume that we are? Why would we think that we're any different than everything else in the universe? What would make us so special? Libertarians are right that it's really hard to disregard the feeling of freedom. If I didn't choose to eat oatmeal this morning, why do I feel like I did? And what made me do it? But hard determinists say that the difference between the causes of human actions and the causes of physical events, like a bat hitting a ball, is that our actions have all sorts of invisible causes that happen in our brains. Specifically, when beliefs team up with our desires and our temperament, they say, you get a deliberate human action. Combine my belief that oatmeal is nutritious with my desire for healthy nourishment and the temperament that predisposes me to enjoy warm, carby comfort foods, and ta-da! You get oatmeal-y breakfast. Now, you might argue that those particular beliefs, desires, and temperaments might lead to any number of breakfast choices, cream of wheat maybe, or some granola. But if you dig deep enough, you'd find that there are factors that rule out those options, as well as every other option. Maybe I'm a little worried one of my fillings is coming loose, so I'm shying away from granola because it's too crunchy. Or I just don't think about cream of wheat very often. I mean, they don't have very good brand awareness anymore. What even is cream of wheat exactly? And the oatmeal is sitting right there in front of me. Or maybe I briefly think of making one of those quinoa breakfast bowls that are so hip right now, but my lazy temperament or my belief that I'm running late pushes me to choose the 90 seconds in the microwave option. See how it works? All you have to do is change one factor, a belief, a desire, or temperament, and you get a different outcome. Hard determinists argue that just because we can't pinpoint the exact factors that led us to an action, we could, in theory, isolate them if we knew enough about all of the beliefs, desires, and temperaments swirling around in our brains. So in this view, what we call decisions are really just the inevitable results of a bunch of mental stuff combining in just the right way. And maybe it feels free, but it's not. But hold up, isn't there some way out of this? Like, what if I have someone choose my breakfast for me? Or what if I fall back on randomness by, like, flipping a coin? After all, if I just flipped a coin, then it wouldn't look like that decision was made by beliefs, desires, and temperaments. But, well, no such luck, because even if I thought I chose randomly, my decision to flip the coin or who I asked to pick for me was just as determined as everything else. And guess what? If you're getting angry right now about me telling you that none of your choices are free, well, that anger was determined. If you're finding this whole topic confusing or boring, yup, still determined. You think you can freely choose to stop playing this video, but if you're still watching me, good news, that's determined too. Determinists believe that you can't help but feel and react the way you're reacting right now. You can think you're choosing to act in ways that conform to the character that you've selected and shaped for yourself, but even that choice is the result of all sorts of already determined factors about you and your place in the world. Hard determinism is tough to refute, and it has some really uncomfortable implications. It means the deeply held feeling most of us have that we actually make free decisions is just wrong. And the whole concept of personal responsibility is thrown out the window too. As Dolbach put it, we're all just cogs in a machine doing what we were always meant to do with no actual volition. Oedipus had to kill his dad and marry his mom. I had to eat oatmeal.
Many near-death experiences share a profound insight. Major life events and turning points are not random. They are chosen and mapped out whilst being out of time and the body, including challenging experiences like illness, suffering, or even cancer. And when healing occurs, it involves not just changing the body or circumstances, but unwinding the deeper choice behind the experience. In other words, for healing to be truly lasting, the original plan or agreement must be released and realigned.
Yeah, so it didn't have words. It looked a little bit more like if you ever ride like the subway or the train or SkyTrain or whatever, and you look at the map and it has like a central line and then it has these like deviation points kind of, sort of looked like that. Okay, it kind of looked like that, and that's the closest I could explain it. And each of those points represent like what I call a destiny point, something that your soul wishes to learn in this lifetime. And so before I came into this lifetime, I created that entire blueprint with my guides and my counsel. We stood at that same table. We were like, my soul was like, I want to learn this and I want to do this and I want to do this. And they were like, okay, we're going to put in a near-death experience like somewhere around here. And I'm like, yeah, high five. Sounds great. Let's do it. Like, we create those things and they kind of counsel us on, yes, definitely take on this experience. Maybe your experience is moving through grief, I don't know, or abundance. It could be any one of those. And they may counsel you on, your last lifetime was very challenging in grief. You might not be ready to take on grief again in this lifetime. So what if we save that for another time? And then you're like, okay, so I won't do that. Like, there's a collaborative effort in our lifetime design for what we're going to do. And that's why after we complete the lifetime, we review it with them and go over like what worked, what didn't. And that's where we decide what we want to bring into a next lifetime, right? So if we find there was, say, addictions was a thing that just never, you couldn't move through it in this lifetime, oftentimes people will bring that into a next lifetime to be able to transcend it in some form.
So I wouldn't say it was like projected on a wall or a movie screen opened up. It was more like I just could access it. And it was exactly what people talk about with the life review, in that I saw most of my life going by like a movie. I saw good and bad. And one of the things that really stuck with me that I want to share with you is about bad people. Why do bad things happen? Why is there evil? I had a good childhood growing up. I had a lot of happy moments. My parents were, good parents for the most part, but my father was abusive. He had probably what most people would describe as a sex addiction, and he took that out on me. And in that life review, then I was able to see that we plan our lives, and this is very hard to hear for a lot of people. We planned that. If you want to look at another story, Betty Guadagno talks about this as well. We planned to play what could be described as good and evil, right? So he went to Earth to learn things. His soul went there because it wanted to experience certain things which would make his soul stronger and consequently make all of us stronger, because we're all one. And I went there to serve in a space where I could make that happen for him. So I could put myself in a space where he could do what he needed to do to grow his soul, to grow our souls, and likewise the same thing for me. So that helped me understand that situation so much better when I was able to access that memory of that life review experience when I came back to Earth. And then as the life review is coming to an end, I'm realizing, because here's another really interesting thing about good and evil and all of that, right? So I've left my human body, and when we're in our human bodies, we're under the veil and we have these expectations which are very different than when you go home. Because like I was just talking about, if I planned a life where I agreed to be used, which seems so strange on this side, that's a really good view into how we are thinking so differently on the other side. So here I am in this life review, and the only person who judges you, the only entity that judges you on the other side is you. So the only person judging me is me. Every other entity around me, every other soul, every other person is so loving and compassionate and, holding me and cheering me on for going through these things. But I'm still chastising myself about these choices I made, because I'm still partially connected with my human body, with my human self. Angela's still in there. And as I'm chastising myself, I'm thinking, well, on Earth, we're told if we don't do things right, we're supposed to go to purgatory or hell or something like that. Maybe I should do that. And Melanie, because it's all telepathic, is at the exact same time thinking, wait, no, you are a very good person and we love you and we support you, and right, all in the same moment, right? Just like when I was in the hospital room and it's all happening instantaneously.
So the soul contract isn't always an easy path. And sometimes people say, well, did we choose our parents? Did we choose the difficult things that happen in our lifetimes? That's the way I'm going to answer that might actually challenge some people, because it certainly challenges me sometimes when I step back and think about what I have personally survived. So did I choose to have cancer? Did I sign up for that before I was incarnated? My immediate answer is yes.
I was in remission for about 3 years, and then my symptoms started to come back. And it threw me kind of into a tailspin because I'm like, wait, I thought I was healed. I thought you guys healed me. Why am I starting to have symptoms again? And I actually ended up getting pretty sick. I ended up being hospitalized with sepsis. I almost died from this illness. And as I was in the hospital, my angels and my guides came to comfort me, and they let me know that this was happening to me not because I was being punished, but because I still hadn't changed the core belief that had me calling it in the first place. So now I was calling it back in again to keep me safe. And what they explained to me was I call in an illness to help me to deal with expectation. This is wild. Expectation of being a certain kind of wife or being a certain kind of mother, or even expectations at work that I am terrified that I cannot fulfill. And so I call in this illness to make it so I don't actually have to be responsible for meeting those expectations. And they had to allow me to bring this back in so they could show me the ways that I could heal myself before and then make myself sick, and then how to bring myself back out of that sickness again. And part of bringing yourself out of that sickness is really getting to the root cause of why you're calling it in the first place. I didn't realize how terrified I was of meeting expectations of other people. I felt like I wasn't good enough. I felt like I couldn't do it. I felt like I was going to be found out to be a fraud. I felt like all of these things. And so a perfect example is if I would have a project at work, I would be fine with the project at work until someone set a deadline. And then I would freak out. And without fail, I would get sick and not be able to meet that deadline. The healing part is something that I'm still always learning about. I think there's so much in healing modalities that is to be learned and to experienced and understood. And my guides have taught me a lot of what it was that I needed to heal. But really, it comes down to, at its core, your belief system. It comes down to, why are you pulling in this illness? Why is it? What is it that it's helping you to escape from or cope with or cover up? And when you get down to that reason and you actually work to heal that reason, you will find that your health gets better. You can do healing energy work. Absolutely. It works amazing, as it did during my awakening. I was in remission for 3 years. But if you don't heal those core beliefs, you're going to keep pulling it back in.
We don't consciously choose our deepest motivations or patterns. They arise from the unconscious. But we can expand our emotional intelligence, reshape the forces that guide us, let authentic determination lead the way. How? By opening ourselves to new perspectives, learning from different cultures and languages, serving others through volunteering, engaging in sport and the arts, undoing the patterns that sabotage our wellness, and approaching life with curiosity rather than rigid expectations. When we recognize our shared connection with all people and experiences, even the seemingly random ones, life begins to feel guided and meaningful, despite that we don't know who's affected by our influence. Most meditation and mindfulness teachings tell us to be in the present moment, to come back to the here and now. But what does that actually mean? Ruben Laukkanen completed an award-winning PhD on the cognitive science of insight at the University of Queensland in 2019, followed by postdoctoral research at the Vrije Universiteit of Amsterdam on the computational neuroscience of meditation. In 2025, Ruben founded the Flourishing Intelligence Program, FLIP, at Linacre College, University of Oxford. Ruben has an eclectic contemplative background, including Zen, Advaita, and Theravada, and his interviews and writings have attracted millions of views.
Several times. And most meditative and mindfulness practices require to focus on the present moment. So they say, focus on here and now. Does it exist really here and now? What does it mean here and now? Even from experiential point of view, we don't really experience now. We only experience past, now, gone. Oh, that was now. Now, oh, gone. That was now. And then you move from, you're always looking back. So what is here and now? What is present moment? What is time?
Yeah, it's everything and nothing at the same time. So there's kind of two
care to elaborate?
No, I'll try. So either we can say that everything is the present moment because we only experience the present moment. There's nothing outside the present moment. Either we say that it's only the present moment or we're constantly interacting with it. Because no matter what we observe, even when we're thinking about the past or lost in mind wandering, where is that happening? Well, it's happening in the present. So actually, it's always the present. There is nothing else but the present. That's one perspective to take. That's the kind of ultimate phenomenological position, is that it's all just the present moment unfolding. There's another way to take the present moment, which is as an instruction for meditation, which is also skillful and valuable, which is to say, don't be so sticky. Keep on bringing the mind back to what's in your experience and learn about what's in your experience. That's also skillful, but it's not really the present moment. Because then when we go deeper, as you say, there maybe is no such thing as the present moment if we're going from like a more objective scientific perspective, because indeed, we never interact with the present moment. We are always interacting with something constructed through time. If we were to hit the pure raw senses, for instance, it would be just electrical signals, because it's this simulation is a product of a complex pattern of electrical signals coming in through our sensory systems. And so there are experiences where you encounter something like that, maybe, but it's not very useful. I mean, if you're just like buzzing with electricity and that's all you ever are, I think that's a pretty hopeless. So in some ultimate sense, this present moment is a kind of ridiculous thing. And this is also the irony of the meditation journey, is that you come closer and closer to the present moment. You end up reifying the present moment. You end up kind of getting identified with the present moment. You're like, oh, I just have to keep staying present and stay out of my thoughts, and this kind of weird conflict.
And it's gone, present, gone.
Exactly.
All you're trying is to grasp which already passed, basically.
Yeah, exactly. You get stuck in a loop like this, and you can get stuck in all kinds of loops like this, where you try to be in one state and not the other state, and be in the non-dual state and then not in the dual state, and all of these kind of loops that we get stuck in. And so the present moment is one of these. And so the irony is that you kind of do need to practice coming into the present moment, but then when the thing bottoms out, there is no present moment, and you recognize that it's all the present moment, and there's nowhere to stand, and that it was always the present. It always was and always will be the present moment, and so therefore, it's everything and nothing, as I said.
Many people approach meditation and mindfulness as a way to control the mind, another strategy to feel in charge. But true awareness isn't about control at all. As Rubin beautifully put it, the present moment is a ridiculous thing. You can get caught in a loop, and when you think you've arrived at the present moment, there is no present moment. Meditation can absolutely help you connect with your true self, your authentic awareness. But if it becomes only a practice of managing thoughts or achieving a state, it can limit growth. Real transformation happens when determination opens you to greater self-awareness, new possibilities, and ultimately awakening, not just presence. Tools like journaling and mind mapping help us uncover the beliefs, biases, and past experiences that still shape our behaviour. Through this awareness, transformation doesn't have to be forced. It begins to unfold naturally. Healing becomes lasting. Growth becomes effortless. To support this journey, I created a 3-part course. I named it Everyday Miracles. Part 1, Grounding. Part 2, Cultivating Vision. Part 3, Energy and Integration. Each part contains 11 units, and each unit is built around a core principle and a matching practice. Examples of a unit include Principle: unite human vulnerability with the strength of source. Self-awareness: understanding confirmation bias. Possibilities: exploring the insight there is no death. Transformation: releasing the need to always prove your point.